Sheldon Adelson didn't merely alter Las Vegas. He fundamentally reshaped it, transforming it from a domain of mob-fueled allure into a meticulously engineered financial engine. The city, once he concluded his endeavors, would never resonate the same. Allow me to recount the narrative of a man who demonstrated that dominion over the entertainment capital of the world required neither weaponry nor showgirls. What was essential was a singular vision, an ego as vast as the famed Strip, and the unyielding resolve to convert a casual agreement into an ironclad commitment. This is the chronicle of how a young man from Boston's most impoverished districts erected a commercial behemoth on the bedrock of conventions and construction, engaged in protracted conflicts with labor unions as if they were personal adversaries, and ultimately compelled Las Vegas to shed its distinct identity. Prepare yourselves, for this account delves into the realms of dominance, control, and the unsettling consequence of sacrificing a city's spirit for mere profit. I grew up immersed in tales of the old Las Vegas, the era of the Rat Pack, the mellifluous voice of Sinatra, the rich aroma of cigars, and the percussive symphony of chips cascading onto felt. Yet, by the time Sheldon Adelson entered the picture, Las Vegas had already bartered its essence for spreadsheets and shareholder reports. And he amassed fortunes doing so. Let us commence our exploration at the genesis of every significant saga, the beginning. Born Sheldon Gary Adelson on August 4, 1933, in the Dorchester section of Boston, his early life bore little resemblance to the opulent empire he would later command. His father, Arthur, operated a taxi, while his mother, Sarah, managed a knitting shop from their confined apartment. The family of 6 shared a solitary room within a tenement building. In their neighborhood, affluence was defined by possessing $3 in one's pocket. Arthur Adelson had arrived at the age of 12, seeking refuge from persecution in Lithuania. He never progressed beyond the 6th grade. Sarah's father had been a Welsh coal miner before immigrating from England. They toiled through arduous hours simply to ensure sustenance. Sheldon, a Jewish boy, found himself in an Irish enclave where youths frequently emerged from hiding spots armed with brass knuckles and rubber hoses. School represented a daily struggle for survival. Home was synonymous with the gnawing pangs of hunger. The winters were particularly brutal. No heating, paper-thin walls, and 4 children confined to a single room with their parents. Adelson would later confide to Forbes magazine, "We had to attend school with at least 4 children." The Irish kids would emerge from the bushes and tenements wielding rubber hoses, chains, and brass knuckles. Yet, amidst this crucible of hardship, within those frigid Boston nights and the volatile schoolyard skirmishes, a spark ignited within him. At the age of 12, Sheldon secured a loan of $200 from his Uncle Al and purchased a newspaper route. He sold papers on Boston's street corners, where he began to grasp the concepts of interest, loans, and the paramount importance of honoring one's commitments. His uncle imparted a crucial piece of wisdom. The manner in which you conduct the remainder of your life will be determined by how you handle this. Adelson never forgot this admonishment. He meticulously repaid the loan, with interest, precisely on time. His uncle was deeply impressed. This initial foray into entrepreneurship blossomed into an all-consuming passion. By the age of 15, he had borrowed $10,000 to establish a business distributing candy vending machines. By 16, he was generating substantial income. College followed. He enrolled at City College in New York, pursuing studies in corporate finance and real estate. However, the academic environment felt restrictive, akin to a cage. He withdrew, enlisted in the Army, received an honorable discharge, and then commenced selling toiletry kits. Subsequently, he launched De-Ice-It, a chemical spray designed to clear frozen windshields. In the 1960s, he returned to Boston and acquired a stake in a charter tour operation, achieving his first $1 million. The stock market experienced a significant downturn in the late 60s, resulting in the complete loss of his fortune. He then pivoted to real estate, focusing on condominium conversions, and amassed another fortune in the early 70s. That market subsequently crashed as well, leading to another devastating loss. He had attained his first million by the age of 30, only to lose it, then rebuild it, and lose it once more. By the time he reached his 40s, he had initiated 50 distinct business ventures. While some achieved success, the majority faltered. Nevertheless, Adelson persisted, continually striving. He once remarked, "Until I was in my 30s, I never realized I was an entrepreneur. I believed I was merely a drifter with a limited attention span." Perhaps, but drifters do not construct empires. A business associate once discovered Adelson seated at his kitchen table in a Boston suburb. He had experienced both immense wealth and profound financial ruin on two separate occasions. Most individuals would have succumbed to despair. Not Sheldon. In 1971, Adelson acquired a controlling interest in a company that published computer magazines. It was at this juncture that a pivotal realization occurred. While perusing one of these publications during a flight from Chicago to Boston, he recognized the conspicuous absence of a major trade exhibition catering to computer dealers. Sheldon Adelson did not tolerate overlooked opportunities. Consequently, in 1979, he launched Comdex, the Computer Dealers Exposition. The inaugural event was held at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, featuring 167 exhibitors and just under 4,000 attendees. Many dismissed his endeavor as madness. Adelson possessed no inherent knowledge of computers. He could not even power one on. However, he possessed an innate understanding of salesmanship. He knew how to imbue people with the feeling that they would be missing out if they did not attend. And Las Vegas provided the ideal backdrop. Affordable hotel accommodations, entertainment options, and casinos offered everything a traveling salesman could desire. The exposition began modestly, but Adelson possessed a remarkable talent. He could anticipate market demands before consumers were even aware of them. Personal computers were on the cusp of widespread adoption. Companies like Apple, IBM, and Microsoft all required a platform to showcase their products to dealers and retailers. Comdex evolved into that essential venue. By 1982, Microsoft occupied a 10 by 10-foot booth at Comdex in Atlantic City. 3 years later, Bill Gates unveiled Windows in Las Vegas. By 1987, Comdex attracted over 100,000 individuals. Gates adopted it as his primary keynote stage. The exposition became the pulsating nucleus of the technological revolution, and Sheldon Adelson reaped financial rewards that would have astounded his younger self. At its zenith, Comdex drew 225,000 participants. Its scope expanded across multiple venues, overwhelming the Las Vegas Convention Center. Hotels hosted overflow events, and suites were repurposed as meeting rooms. The entire city underwent a profound transformation. It transcended being merely a trade show. It became a mecca for technology enthusiasts. And Adelson was the proprietor of this sacred ground. He extracted every conceivable ounce of profit from the event, selling advertising space on banners and tote bags, and publishing a daily newsletter replete with advertisements. He levied a charge of $50 per square foot from exhibitors for convention center space that cost him a mere $15. Critics decried his avarice. Adelson characterized it as efficiency. By the mid-80s, his interface group was generating over $300 million annually. He organized 40 distinct trade shows, but Comdex remained the undisputed crown jewel. Then, in 1995, he divested Comdex and 16 other trade shows to Japan's SoftBank Corporation for $862 million. $862 million. At 62 years of age, Sheldon Adelson possessed a financial cushion of a magnitude that did not evaporate during market downturns. The kind of capital capable of erecting monuments. Adelson now had the financial resources. The next step was to construct his empire. In 1989, Adelson and his partners acquired the Sands Hotel and Casino from Kirk Kerkorian for $110 million. The Sands, a legendary haunt of Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack, a place where Dean Martin delivered his comedic monologues and Sammy Davis Jr. danced until the early hours, was, to Adelson, merely a parcel of real estate. He harbored no sentimentality for its storied past. His focus was on square footage and the potential for convention space. The era of the Rat Pack was relegated to history. The future belonged to meetings, incentive travel, conventions, and exhibitions, the industry referred to as MICE. Consequently, in 1990, he erected the Sands Expo and Convention Center directly adjacent to the hotel, encompassing 1.2 million square feet. At that time, it stood as the largest privately held convention center in the United States. Adelson operated under a distinct theory. Most casinos experienced peak profitability on weekends when tourists converged upon the Strip. But weekdays were desolate. Rooms remained vacant, dealers idle, and restaurants operated at reduced capacity. Adelson's objective was to fill these accommodations with convention attendees, business travelers wielding corporate credit cards who would patronize upscale dining establishments, purchase expensive beverages, and reserve lavish suites. They would book thousands of rooms for extended periods of 3, 4, or 5 days, ensuring consistent revenue without the inherent unpredictability. Las Vegas insiders scoffed at his ambition. They contended that convention attendees were disinclined to gamble, to spend freely, or to tip generously. They derided his construction of the expansive convention center as a wasteful endeavor. Adelson remained unfazed by their skepticism. He understood what they failed to grasp. Conventions were not primarily about gambling. They were about volume, predictability, and the transformation of weekdays into profitable periods. And his prescience proved accurate. By the mid-90s, attendance at Las Vegas conventions had tripled. By 2019, the city hosted 6.6 million convention-goers annually, with their expenditures per trip exceeding those of regular tourists by 18%. Adelson did not merely fill hotel rooms. He fundamentally altered the entire business paradigm of Las Vegas. He propelled the city to become a preeminent convention destination, and the rest of the Strip emulated his strategy. MGM constructed additional convention facilities, Caesars expanded its existing spaces, and Wynn developed more. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority was compelled to acknowledge the validity of Adelson's approach, allocating tax revenues towards the expansion of the Las Vegas Convention Center. The model proved exceptionally effective, prompting other cities to attempt replication, yet none could rival Las Vegas. However, the original Sands, imbued with history, spectral echoes, and cherished memories, was destined for demolition. On November 26, 1996, Adelson orchestrated the implosion of the Sands Hotel in a nationally televised spectacle. Thousands congregated to witness the event. Cameras from every major broadcast network captured the dramatic scene. The edifice that once served as Frank Sinatra's sanctuary collapsed into a cloud of dust within mere seconds. Some onlookers wept, particularly the older generation who reminisced about the establishment's illustrious past. Others cheered, captivated by the anticipation of what would follow. Adelson observed with a smile. His vision did not encompass the past. In its place, he erected the Venetian, a lavish resort valued at $1.5 billion, inspired by his honeymoon in Venice, Italy with his second wife, Miriam. The Venetian commenced operations on May 3, 1999, featuring serenading gondoliers and a meticulously crafted replica of the Grand Canal flowing through its shopping mall. The renowned actress Sophia Loren graced the dedication of the first motorized gondola. Trumpets blared, and white doves were released, marking a quintessential Las Vegas spectacle. Every guest accommodation was a suite, and every detail exuded opulence, from the marble floors to the hand-painted ceilings. The resort boasted 18 high-end dining establishments and a shopping mall adorned with canals where gondoliers performed Italian opera. And it was a resounding success. The Venetian emerged as one of the most triumphant resorts in the annals of Las Vegas history. Fortune magazine declared it instrumental in catalyzing the overall revitalization of Las Vegas itself. However, a critical aspect emerged. The laborers who constructed the Venetian were unionized. Every crane operator, every electrician, every carpenter belonged to a union. The staff who would ultimately operate it, however, were not under union contracts. And herein lay the genesis of a protracted conflict. When Adelson shuttered the sands, he terminated the employment of over 500 unionized workers. They were not afforded the 60 days notice mandated by federal law, nor were they guaranteed employment at the Venetian. They were simply dismissed. Legal actions ensued. Former Sands employees filed lawsuits, alleging they had not received adequate notification of termination. The courts ultimately ruled that the former Sands had violated federal labor laws. However, by that juncture, the building had already been reduced to rubble. The Culinary Union was incensed. This union represented housekeepers, waitstaff, cooks, and bartenders, the very foundation of the hospitality industry in Las Vegas, and Adelson had unceremoniously discarded them. Union organizers initiated picketing at the Venetian's construction site. They organized protests and broadcast music at high volumes outside the preview center, attempting to dissuade potential retailers from leasing space, implying that doing so would signify an alignment with an anti-labor enterprise. Adelson remained unyielding. He communicated with politicians, specifically Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley, who had previously been employed by him, stating, "Old Democrats were with the Union, and I wanted to break the back of the Union. Consequently, I had to break the back of the Democrats." He was resolute in his conviction. Adelson believed that unions were archaic, remnants of an era when workers required protection from unchecked corporate power. He asserted that this was modern America, and his employees would receive superior treatment, surpassing that of unionized workers. He claimed his compensation would be competitive, his benefits generous, and his employees would possess autonomy. Autonomy to negotiate their own terms, their own schedules, and their own remuneration. The union vehemently refuted these claims. They pointed to his employment application forms, which permitted at-will termination and allowed for wage adjustments without prior notification. They highlighted that restaurant workers employed by independent establishments within the Venetian could earn as little as $5.50 per hour with no benefits. The dispute intensified. 1,000 members of the Culinary Union assembled to protest on opening night, marching, chanting, and carrying placards. The Venetian became the sole major casino on the Las Vegas Strip that did not recognize unions. This situation persisted for 25 years, characterized by continuous protests, legal battles, and acrimonious standoffs. Adelson even asserted ownership of the sidewalks in front of the Venetian, attempting to prevent protesters from assembling there. The legal standing of these sidewalks became a contentious issue when street-widening projects encroached upon the Venetian's property. The American Civil Liberties Union intervened. Gary Peck, the executive director, stated, "Perhaps Sheldon Adelson and the president of this company need a civics lesson. And if that's the case, the ACLU will be happy to provide one." Law enforcement officers were dispatched to mediate, tasked with determining whether the sidewalks were public or private. If public, the protesters possessed the right to be present. If private, they were considered trespassers. However, Adelson perceived unions as detrimental to efficiency. He desired complete control over hiring, firing, and compensation, viewing it as sound business practice and the optimal functioning of capitalism. For the workers, it represented a profound betrayal. The union remained steadfast in its resolve, continuing its picketing efforts year after year. Monica Bauer, a former cocktail waitress at the Sands, dedicated her weekends to protesting for 6 years, mirroring her involvement in the Frontier strike prior to that establishment unionizing. She expressed, "We will prevail this time as well." And she was proven correct, though it required a quarter of a century. Only following Adelson's passing in 2021 and subsequent to Apollo Global Management's acquisition of the Venetian did the workers finally achieve union recognition. 99% of Venetian employees voted in favor of the union contract. 25 years marked the longest labor dispute in the history of Las Vegas. The secretary-treasurer of the Culinary Union remarked, "We have a different perspective on time than most people. We view time, perhaps, a little differently." Adelson's conflicts, however, extended beyond labor disputes. They encompassed politicians, regulators, newspaper editors, and anyone who dared to impede his progress. This was because Sheldon Adelson possessed something even more potent than wealth: political influence. In the early 90s, Adelson began contributing to Republican candidates. Initially, these contributions were modest, a few $1,000s here, $10,000 there. He had identified as a Democrat for the majority of his life, and his parents had also been Democrats. However, a shift occurred. He became convinced that the Republican Party better served business interests, demonstrated stronger support for Israel, and aligned more closely with his vision for America. Following the Supreme Court's Citizens United ruling in 2010, which effectively removed restrictions on political contributions, Adelson ascended to the status of a kingmaker. In 2012, Adelson and his wife Miriam contributed over $90 million in an effort to unseat Barack Obama. They emerged as the most substantial individual donors in American history. These funds supported super PACs, fueled attack advertisements, and financed opposition research. Their efforts were unsuccessful. Obama secured re-election. Nevertheless, Adelson gleaned a valuable lesson. Money possessed persuasive power, and an abundance of it amplified that influence exponentially. Between 2010 and 2020, Sheldon and Miriam Adelson donated over $500 million to Republican causes. $500 million. He was Donald Trump's largest financial supporter in both 2016 and 2020. He contributed $25 million to Trump's presidential campaign, $5 million to his inauguration, $500,000 to Trump's legal defense fund during the Mueller investigation, and $75 million to a pro-Trump super PAC in 2020. Journalists frequently referred to him as a kingmaker. During the 2016 Republican primaries, candidates embarked on pilgrimages to the Venetian, seeking Adelson's endorsement and financial backing. Jeb Bush, Chris Christie, Scott Walker, and John Kasich all sought his favor. In 2015, Trump tweeted, "Sheldon Adelson is giving big dollars to Rubio because he feels he can mold him into his perfect little puppet." I agree. However, after Trump secured the nomination, Adelson pledged his support, and Trump subsequently delivered. Adelson's singular focus was Israel. He once declared, "I am a one-issue person. That issue is Israel." In 2017, Trump relocated the United States Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a decision Adelson had actively lobbied for years to achieve. This move was met with considerable controversy, drawing condemnation from the United Nations and opposition from United States allies. Palestinians engaged in violent protests, resulting in dozens of fatalities. Nevertheless, Adelson and Miriam occupied front-row seats at the embassy's opening ceremony. Ivanka Trump hosted the event, and Benjamin Netanyahu was also in attendance. It represented a moment of profound triumph for Adelson. In 2018, Trump bestowed upon Miriam Adelson the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, ostensibly in recognition of her contributions to medicine and philanthropy. However, the true motivation was widely understood. The Adelsons had contributed over $120 million to Republican causes in 2018 alone. Critics argued that Adelson was essentially purchasing policy, that his financial contributions granted him undue influence over American foreign policy, and that a billionaire casino magnate was shaping critical decisions regarding war and peace in the Middle East. Adelson maintained that he was supporting his deeply held convictions, endorsing candidates who shared his values, and championing Israel, which he viewed as America's most indispensable ally. Regardless of the interpretation, Adelson commanded the attention of presidents. When Trump visited Las Vegas following the tragic massacre at the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival in 2017, one of his initial meetings was with Adelson. When Trump sought counsel on Middle East policy, he consulted Adelson. When Trump required financial resources for his 2020 campaign, Adelson provided the necessary funds. The Republican Party had become increasingly reliant on Adelson's financial support. Congressional candidates actively sought his favor, and Senate candidates pledged to align their policies with his perspectives on Israel. The party's foreign policy agenda began to shift in accordance with his views. However, Adelson's most significant wealth was not generated in Las Vegas or Washington, D.C., but rather across the Pacific in a diminutive gambling enclave known as Macau. In 2004, Las Vegas Sands inaugurated the Sands Macau, the first casino of its kind in China, modeled after Las Vegas establishments. The project, costing $265 million, recouped its investment in less than a year. On opening day, patrons quite literally breached the doors in their eagerness to enter. Security personnel were overwhelmed by the throngs of people, who endured hours of waiting simply to gain admission. The casino proved so exceptionally profitable that it astonished even Adelson. Wall Street reacted with immense enthusiasm. The company commenced trading publicly in December 2004 at $29 per share, with Adelson retaining an 87.9% ownership stake. His net worth experienced an unprecedented surge overnight. Over the ensuing 2 years, he amassed nearly $1 million per hour, an unparalleled sustained increase in personal wealth in recorded history. By 2007, his net worth reached $26.5 billion, and Forbes magazine ranked him as the third wealthiest individual in the United States. However, Adelson was far from finished. In August 2007, he opened the Venetian Macao on a stretch of reclaimed land known as Cotai. At that time, it was the largest building in the world, encompassing 10.5 million square feet, featuring 3,000 hotel rooms, and boasting the planet's most extensive casino floor, spanning 370,000 square feet. The project incurred a cost of $2.7 billion. Critics deemed his undertaking reckless. They described the location as substandard, literally landfill, swampy terrain situated between two islands. The market was considered untested. Adelson was staking his entire fortune on a strip of reclaimed land, which he christened the Cotai Strip, envisioning it as his counterpart to the Las Vegas Strip. It necessitated the installation of thousands of pilings driven deep into the earth to support the colossal structure. It demanded a visionary outlook that few others possessed. The majority of gaming executives believed Adelson had lost his faculties. And once again, Adelson proved to be correct. The Venetian Macao transformed into a veritable money-printing machine, attracting 75,000 visitors daily. Within 4 years, it had completely recouped its initial investment. By 2010, Macau had surpassed Las Vegas as the world's highest-grossing gambling center. Adelson proceeded to develop additional properties, including the Four Seasons, the Plaza Macau, Sands Cotai Central, subsequently rebranded as the Londoner, and the Parisian Macau, complete with a half-scale replica of the Eiffel Tower. In Singapore, he successfully secured a highly competitive license to construct Marina Bay Sands. This project cost $5.6 billion, making it the most expensive hotel and casino ever built. It comprised 3 towers interconnected at their summits by a 3-acre sky park featuring an infinity pool. The architect was Moshe Safdie, and the design was daringly audacious. Critics likened it to a surfboard precariously balanced atop 3 buildings, yet it rapidly evolved into an instant icon, defining Singapore's skyline. 8 months after its opening, it reported an operating profit of $600 million. By the time his endeavors concluded, Macau accounted for 63% of Las Vegas Sands' revenue, with Singapore contributing an additional 22%. The United States ranked last in revenue contribution. Macau propelled Adelson to become one of the wealthiest individuals on Earth. At his peak, his net worth soared to $35 billion, positioning him as the 19th wealthiest person globally. However, even fortunes of such magnitude are susceptible to collapse. In 2008, the global financial crisis precipitated a dramatic decline in Las Vegas Sands stock value, plummeting from $144 to less than $2 per share. The company lost 90% of its valuation in under a year, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Within the corporation, executives were locked in a bitter struggle. Bill Widener, the chief operating officer, characterized it as a ferocious, no-holds-barred conflict. A faction advocated for withdrawing from projects in Macau, while others insisted on pressing forward. AD aligned himself with the aggressive approach. He was convinced that halting construction would be perceived as a sign of weakness, alienating investors and creditors, and irrevocably damaging the company's reputation. Consequently, he persisted with building endeavors even as financial backing dwindled and Wall Street analysts forecasted bankruptcy. Despite his own executives imploring him to decelerate, shareholders initiated legal action, alleging gross mismanagement. They contended that Aden and the board had overextended the company, disregarded discernible warning signs, and prioritized personal ego over prudent decision-making. The lawsuit asserted that the board lacked the fortitude to counter AD's dominant influence. One executive candidly acknowledged a significant misstep in failing to secure additional capital earlier. In response, AD personally injected over $1 billion of his own funds to sustain the company, acquiring preferred stock and warrants. His wife, Miriam, contributed an additional $25 million, thereby rescuing the enterprise. The lawsuits were ultimately dismissed. A judge determined that AD and the board had exercised sound business judgment during a period of unprecedented global crisis. Las Vegas Sands persevered, and by the year 2013, AD's net worth had surged by $15 billion in a single year, earning him a prominent position on Forbes's list of top earners. However, the foundational weaknesses within his empire were beginning to surface. In 2010, Stephen Jacobs, the chief executive officer of Sands China, was terminated. Jacobs subsequently filed a lawsuit, alleging that Aden had compelled him to participate in illicit activities, including breaches of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The lawsuit further claimed that AD had authorized payments totaling $700,000 to Lionel A.L.S., a legislator in Macau whose legal firm represented Las Vegas Sands. Both the company's general counsel and external legal advisors had cautioned that such actions could contravene federal statutes. The lawsuit also implicated individuals connected to organized crime, alleging bribery, corruption, and a corporate culture that placed financial gain above legal adherence. Investigations were launched by the United States Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, Nevada gaming authorities, and Chinese officials. AD vehemently denied these accusations, labeling them as falsehoods and fabrications. He reassured investors, stating, "When the dust settles, I am not 100%, but 1,000% certain that there will be no fire beneath it." The legal proceedings extended for several years. Jacobs sought millions in unpaid compensation. AD retaliated with a countersuit, accusing Jacobs of engaging in unauthorized transactions and violating company policies. In 2015, Las Vegas Sands reached a settlement with the SEC, agreeing to pay $9 million without admitting any wrongdoing. The Jacobs case was resolved confidentially shortly thereafter, but the reputational damage had already occurred. AD's public image had been tarnished. The man who espoused control and discipline had presided over a company accused of widespread corruption. Compounding these issues were challenges in his personal life. AD married his first wife Sandra in the 1970s. They adopted 3 children, Mitchell, Gary, and Shelley. Their union lasted nearly 2 decades but concluded in divorce in 1988. In 1989, AD met Miriam Farbstein Oxhorn on a blind date. She was a physician of Israeli origin specializing in addiction treatment. The daughter of Polish refugees who had escaped prior to the Holocaust, she had grown up in Haifa, where her father owned several movie theaters. She obtained degrees in microbiology and genetics, followed by a medical degree. She served in the Israeli army as a medical officer and became an authority on drug dependency and the biological underpinnings of chemical addiction. They exchanged vows in Jerusalem in 1991. Miriam brought 2 daughters from her previous marriage, whom AD subsequently adopted. Together, they had 2 sons. Miriam evolved into his partner in every facet of his life. She influenced his strong support for Israel, co-signed his political contributions, and served as his advisor, confidant, and moral compass. However, the AD family also experienced profound tragedy. Mitchell, AD's adopted son, succumbed to a drug overdose in 2005. He had grappled with addiction from an early age, utilizing cocaine and heroin. This loss devastated Sheldon and intensified his opposition to marijuana legalization. He firmly believed that cannabis acted as a gateway drug and consequently contributed millions to campaigns opposing marijuana initiatives in Florida and other states. AD and Miriam established drug treatment clinics in Las Vegas and Tel Aviv and donated substantial sums to medical research. The Dr. Miriam and Sheldon G.A.D. Research Clinic emerged as a leading institution in addiction treatment. Nevertheless, the profound pain of losing Mitchell never entirely subsided. In 2015, A.D. made another contentious decision, secretly acquiring the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Nevada's largest newspaper. The transaction was orchestrated through a series of shell corporations to obscure his identity. Upon discovering A.D.'s ownership, numerous reporters resigned, fearing he would leverage the newspaper to advance his business and political agendas and compromise editorial integrity. Their apprehensions proved well-founded, as the newspaper's coverage of A.D.'s endeavors notably softened, critical articles vanished, and editorial policies underwent significant alterations. Nonetheless, A.D. now effectively controlled the narrative within his own city. In 2019, A.D. was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He took a medical leave of absence, underwent treatment, returned briefly, and then departed again. On January 7, 2021, Las Vegas Sands announced A.D.'s stepping back from his active role. Rob Goldstein, the company's long-standing president, assumed the position of acting chief executive officer. 4 days later, Sheldon A.D. passed away at his residence in Malibu, California, at the age of 87. Tributes flooded in, with politicians commending his foresight, business leaders hailing him as a pioneer, and philanthropists lauding his generosity. Donald Trump described him as a close and dear friend and praised his dedication to Israel. However, the workers who had contended with him for 25 years remembered a different individual. Following his death, Miriam A.D. became the principal shareholder of Las Vegas Sands, commanding 56.6% of the company's stock through personal holdings and family trusts. She unexpectedly found herself among the world's wealthiest women, with a net worth exceeding $30 billion. In February 2022, less than a year after Sheldon's passing, the A.D. family divested the Venetian, Palazzo, and Venetian Expo Center to Apollo Global Management for $6.25 billion. This sale marked the conclusion of an era. Las Vegas Sands no longer possessed any properties in Las Vegas. The company that had once defined the Strip and fundamentally reshaped the city's economic model had completely exited the city, shifting its focus to its substantial holdings in Macau and Singapore. Some viewed this as the ultimate irony. The man who had constructed his empire in Las Vegas had abandoned it. Others considered it an inevitable consequence of evolving market dynamics, with Asia now representing the primary source of revenue. Miriam continued Sheldon's political endeavors, contributing millions to Republican candidates. In 2023, she acquired a controlling stake in the NBA's Dallas Mavericks for $3.5 billion, financing the acquisition by selling $2 billion worth of Las Vegas Sands stock. The AD name continues to adorn buildings, medical clinics, and educational institutions, including an AD campus in Las Vegas, the Dr. Miriam and Sheldon G. AD Medical Research Foundation, and AD programs at universities worldwide. However, the man himself is gone. So, what is his legacy? Sheldon A.D. transformed Las Vegas from a mere gambling destination into a preeminent convention hub. He pioneered the integrated resort concept, merging casinos with convention centers, luxury hotels, and upscale retail establishments. This model became the industry standard, replicated globally. He demonstrated that conventions could generate greater profits than gaming, that business travelers spent more than tourists, and that weekdays could be as lucrative as weekends. He also proved that in contemporary Las Vegas, the mob had been supplanted by billionaires in suits, individuals who, rather than resorting to physical coercion, undermined labor unions, and instead of engaging in clandestine backroom deals, orchestrated super PACs. AD ostensibly rendered Las Vegas corporate, clean, profitable, and respectable. Wall Street embraced this transformation, elevating gaming to a legitimate industry, complete with quarterly earnings calls and shareholder meetings. Yet, in achieving this, some argue he stripped away the very essence that imbued the city with its unique magic. The Rat Pack would likely not recognize the Venetian, and Frank Sinatra would not perform there. Dean Martin would not offer his comedic banter at a convention center bar. For that particular iteration of Las Vegas has vanished, and Sheldon A.D. laid it to rest. He erected an empire built on concrete and conventions. He confronted labor unions, exerted influence over presidents, and transformed a strip of Chinese landfill into the most profitable gambling market on Earth. He generously donated hundreds of millions to medical research, Jewish education, and to Israel, funding clinics that saved lives and programs that enabled young people to explore their heritage. Conversely, he also suppressed unions, purchased newspapers to control public discourse, and invested $500 million in political campaigns. He was characterized by his ruthlessness, brilliance, generosity, vindictiveness, vision, and controversial nature. Ultimately, he irrevocably altered Las Vegas. This concludes the narrative of a genuine Las Vegas luminary. Which aspect of his story resonates most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you enjoy uncovering the real individuals behind the iconic facades, please subscribe, as every legend has a story, and Las Vegas never forgets.